Okay, so we don't have a very long agenda, but there's some pretty important stuff on it. The first item on the agenda is we have Tom joining us. Let's wait a second while he can join. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is what's going on with the shops at the Ridge, and specifically the preliminary application that's been submitted by Home Depot to put a Home Depot store at that site, which took took most of us somewhat by surprise. As some of you may know, TRC a few months back floated several ideas for what they called interim uses at the site. And one of them was big box retail, but it wasn't any more specific than that. Um, but I did get a chance to talk with Byron de Aracal, who is one of the principals of TRC Retail, who is the master leaseholder for the site. The person we used to deal with was Carlos Palafox. He apparently left TRC about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't know whether that has anything to do with this project, but I suspect it may. But he's now got a different job. But I had about a half an hour conversation with Byron, which was quite cordial. Um, and let me just sort of quickly summarize what he said about it. He said essentially that TRC is neutral on that project. They are neither supporting it nor opposing it. As he put it, consider us Switzerland. And which to me says that the impetus for this project is not coming from TRC. And I'm admittedly maybe speculating a little bit, but I suspect it's coming from the property owner. And I think he may have pushed TRC to say, come on, let's do something here. Let's put in a Home Depot. And he may have actually gone ahead and contacted Home Depot and said, would you like to put a store here? And TRC, when confronted with saying, well, I think you should put in this, let this application go in. Needless to say, since TRC is only the master tenant, they says, okay. But TRC is definitely not supporting it or pushing it all. And we've had some informal discussions around RCPC, and it seems the very predominant opinion is it's a bad idea. And I guess maybe where we can get started is asking people on this committee, both people who are formally members of the committee and people who are just interested citizens, what their thoughts are. Do we want to just do a quick go round on people's thoughts on this? Would that make sense? I'm going to try and do it just on the order people are on the screen. So Joe Johnson, could you start?
Sure. I'm not a RCP district resident, but I do live on Pleasant Valley across the street from the vacant lot. And I'm opposed to it. I don't want to see a huge wall on Pleasant Valley. However, I kind of think that this has to be a lifesaver for TRC in terms of earning rent on that vacant site, since it looks like residential is going to be at least 5 years.
Yeah, it's going to be a long haul. Yeah. Leah, your thoughts?
I don't like the idea either, both for what it will look like and the impact it will have, say, on our two neighborhood hardware stores. And it seems to me that 1.7 miles away for the nearest Home Depot really isn't too far.
Mark?
I think it's outrageous. I mean, this is a major site and it should be primarily for housing. There will be some mixed uses. And I think we have to fight very hard to prevent the Home Depot from happening and start fighting very hard for how to make the site more likely for housing.
Leonora.
Well, right after they announced this, the Home Depot in San Jose was set on fire. Lumber, toxic chemicals, paints, the thing burned to the ground. Do we really want that in the neighborhood? I don't. I want to see housing there. And perhaps some other mixed use, but ground floor office, retail, but no, absolutely not.
Glenn.
Well, I haven't seen any kind of a proposal for how you'd fit a big box and all that parking up there, but it's really doesn't relate to the neighborhood. It doesn't relate to who lives in the neighborhood, as you know, as a store that they would, frequent on a, let's say on a weekly basis or something like that. There, a lot of smaller scale stores would be much better. There's nothing, I don't know how you could make an argument about sustainability with this particular company. It doesn't seem, I thought that, a lot of the stores that are currently in that shopping center don't relate to, the RCPC population. How many of us go to Boston Market or something like that? So, I mean, I was hoping for a better fit.
Okay. Jason.
Aesthetically, it seems a disaster. In terms of usage, it does seem like a huge lost opportunity for housing and other maybe more neighborhood-oriented retail. I don't know about the prospects for housing, and I have a question about that, which I'll just put out there, and then maybe you want to continue the go round and maybe talk about it later. But in some of the online discussion of this proposal, I saw comments to the effect that there had been a mixed use proposal for the site, including housing, and that the neighborhood had opposed it and queered that deal in some way. And anyway, I'll put that out there, and if anybody has info on that later, maybe they
There's no truth to that statement. We've been involved in this project. RCPC has been involved since 2007, and in fact, RCPC and all of the other neighborhood groups surrounding this area all supported putting housing on the site.
Yeah.
So there was a formal proposal put forward to have some housing on the site at the same time when Shops at the Ridge was originally approved in 2011. So there's no truth at all to that rumor. Jennifer.
Yes, I agree with everything everybody has said. The one piece that also concerns me, though, is that TRC always comes back and says that the owners have like an exorbitant price if they had to cancel their lease and redo it. They never have said an amount. They never have said like, we would lose, $2 million a year, or there's nothing to grab onto. It's just them saying it would be exorbitant. And I just wonder, if the city was involved, that maybe we could reach out to, some nonprofits or something that support housing to help bridge that gap, and to be able to make some affordable housing there with the mixed use. So I just can't accept that, given the rents, that they can't make housing work.
I think it basically is blackmail by the owner, is what it amounts to. It's the owner basically saying, if you want to do this, it'll cost you an arm and a leg. And I put it to Mr. De Aracal on those terms, and he says, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. They put it out there to make it prohibitive. That was the purpose of the amount that they proposed, was specifically to make it prohibitive.
Yeah, but then make it a combination of some super luxury housing. I mean, super ultimate luxury where they can command higher prices for that. And then, mix in, some other,
Yeah.
No is just another way to say no.
yeah.
Casey,
All right. Good evening, everyone. I agree with all that's been said. I think Mark probably said it the best. This is outrageous. I specifically, just a couple of things that haven't been said yet is I think that intersection gets quite clogged when Oakland Tech students are coming in and out of school. And so I think the large trucks, the construction trucks, everybody that would be utilizing Home Depot would really that would be extremely problematic. I am definitely worried about our small businesses, Cole Hardware and Grand Ace Hardware. I too think it should be housing in some fashion. And I just don't think that parking lot is big enough for a Home Depot in general. Every time I'm in the one in Emeryville, I feel quite overwhelmed by all the activity that's going on. And so I don't think it's suitable to be next to a Safeway there. And then just an important big corner, I think it'd be problematic, but, and I saw the fire and I was extremely concerned about how close proximity we'd be to those toxic fumes. So thanks for raising that, Leonora.
just just as a comment, is Casey was just elected RCPC board chair. So at least for next year, she is our
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tom. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I am?
We can hear you.
I'm sorry, different Tom. Tom Cook.
Oh, sorry. Have the other Tom go ahead then. He doesn't have his first name there, so how would I know?
Tom,
Seems
you're still
French.
muted.
Mr. Chamon.
No, it's still not there. There should be a little microphone thing down in the lower left-hand corner.
Stuart, why don't you go on to someone else and come
Okay,
back?
yeah, well, we'll come back to you, Tom. How about the other Tom?
Oh, okay. So I've got a little experience with things like Home Depot from my time in Marin County, where things like that were going in. And I immediately thought, Home Depot is like a freeway oriented use. You usually want some regional access, right? Their catchment area is probably 15 to 20 miles.
Yeah.
So the idea that you would want a new Home Depot, 2 miles from the existing Home Depot made absolutely no sense, especially when the other one is much more, I would say, centrally located to the circulation grid. So, there was some discussion at the Upper Broadway Advocates meeting about, is this really just a play with trying to renegotiate something with the city of Emeryville about their presence at the site, or with that developer, that this is Home Depot's play here, is it's a negotiating strategy, just as it may be a negotiating strategy if in fact the landowner, as opposed to TRC, are the advocates for this concept, right? And what would be interesting to know is who is it that submitted this proposal to the city, right? Do we know, was it submitted by the Chans? Home Depot can't just, did they submit it on their own?
They have an
Do they
attorney
have-
that I believe,
Huh?
Ronnie, I think you looked it up there.
I looked it up.
Oh, okay. And where-
Okay, so the submission was by a engineering firm based in Fresno.
Oh, well, there you go.
Forgotten their name.
That would
at the
explain
moment.
the design.
Yes, well, and then the address of the LLC, which I hadn't heard of before, is in Oakland. It's up in the Oakland Hills, and then the agent has an office over, I believe, on Piedmont Avenue.
The way this works is that anyone can submit an application, but they need to have the approval of whoever controls the site. I can submit an application for anything if I've got the approval of the owner of the site or the controller. So I'll say more about that when it gets to my turn.
Okay, all right.
Well,
Yeah,
all I
anyway.
was saying is that those are the names on the project submission.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to know, right? Especially the fact that it was designed by an engineer from Fresno. Because when I first heard Home Depot, I got wind of it from a friend of mine who's on the planning commission, right? I was thinking, how on earth would you make a Home Depot work on that site, right? Because I know the kind of acreage they require. I know their circulation requirements. I know their access requirements. They're going to want the front door facing the rest of the parking. And so when the images came out, and different people were flipping different images around, I saw the parking garage on Broadway, like opposite Merrill Gardens. I thought, okay, so somebody who really has never been here is designing this.
When you were cleaning today.
So I think it's
I'm having
it's
trouble
some kind of a, I don't know, it's a negotiation strategy more than it is a proposal, but I don't think we should underestimate our reaction to it, right? I think it should be strong and firm and unified, and to the extent that we could build a broader coalition, I think we should. But it's simply not the right kind of use for this site, right? It needs regional access, and Pleasant Valley and Broadway are not regional access arterials, right? They're neighborhood access arterials, right?
You did?
All right, thank
I
you.
just think it's the wrong idea in the wrong place.
Wait.
I mean, some of y'all have mentioned that it might be, a head fake. I guess Ken Ritchie said that.
That's so.
I know that Home Depot during.
Hold on just a second. There's some noise coming out from somebody in the background. I can't tell where it's coming from. If there's somebody speaking in the background at one of your places, could you ask them to either quiet down or maybe mute yourself while they're talking? Thank you. Go ahead.
That Home Depot in Emeryville was really frustrated with all of the theft going on and all the homeless encampments around their place, and just really fed up. So you're right. It could be that they want the city of Emeryville to provide some kind of, attention to them.
Possible. Yeah. But I don't know. It's hard to figure out what's going on in Home Depot's corporate offices.
But I would only sort of close by saying, I too think it's really should be dominantly a housing site if it wants some incidental retail on the ground level, which is different than what they proposed. I think what that originally was approved was offices above retail. I think it was, right?
The original project was almost entirely retail. It was 2 to 3 stories of retail.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was another era.
Yes.
Pre-Amazon or something. Yeah.
Tom Cook, I see you're.
Am I on or not?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay, good.
Got it solved. Good.
Yeah, I think all the major points have already been made, but I think basically the site needs to be designated as a high priority housing site. And the city, especially since they're redoing the housing element, should be actually, encouraged to make sure that that happens. It's just too valuable in terms of its proximity to BART and to other local services to let any other major use go in there. Again, the argument against the effect of the local stores and the inappropriateness, the point basically it's not freeway oriented and it needs to be. And finally, the city should not be in the position of financing speculation. If the owner wants an extreme price for it, he has no right to that. The value of that land should be determined by the city's regulations.
Okay. Ronnie. Oh, there you go.
I have very little to add. I actually dig up our old website and was looking through what happened in 2012, and we did obviously ask for housing. It's on our old website where we requested that. But, and the old pictures actually, and looking at them, had a big parking lot like we do now. So I do think that it would be I would definitely like to see housing there. We've always wanted to see housing there. And I think we need to tell them. I agree that it's probably the owners are okay with it, maybe because they want to push TRC, maybe because they want to get rent. But I think we're going to have to I think what we should do is all of the groups should get together in the neighborhood, not just neighborhood, but East Bay for everyone, just get everyone together, come together and come as one voice to say, this is not what we want at that site. The second big fight, like we did with the first time this went in.
Okay. Janine?
No additional comment. I don't know enough about the subject to speak on it in an intelligent way. I'm just,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Natalie?
I think thinking back to what happened, 10 years ago, I think they've consistently said that they don't want housing, even though we repeatedly ask for it. So my only concern about saying we don't want Home Depot, we want housing, is that it puts our position out there, our preference, but does it get us anywhere closer to something that we would want to see there, right? Like, I wonder if it might be productive to consider what would work for both parties, right? As opposed to just saying, no, we don't want what you proposed 10 years ago. No, we don't want a Home Depot. We want housing, even though we know you've said that you never want it. And that just kind of leaves us at a stalemate. So I'm wondering if there's a path where we can, I don't know. I know it would be difficult, and I know it would be a very narrow bar, but just throwing it out there as another opinion.
Yeah. Let's see. Scott?
Oh, hello. Without getting into too many opinions on the specific plan on the specific site, I wonder if part of their motivation for pursuing this as a plan is because the Home Depot in Emeryville and the one further south in Oakland are not very good sites, and they have a lot of problems in those areas with like shoplifting and vehicular crime and stuff, and they no doubt wouldn't face those issues here.
Well, they
But
might.
they're not
They
bad
might,
sites.
yeah.
They might bring their own too, but
Yeah.
like if they built one here, it's conceivable to me that they would then follow up by shutting down another store.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, let's see. Well, let's finish off here. I think Ally is the last person.
No, I think Ken has not spoken yet.
Ken, didn't you speak earlier?
Nope,
No. Okay, Ken. I'm sorry.
that's okay. Three things real quick. Obviously, I agree with everyone about housing being what we need there, but I think what's important is that we say as much as possible, not we don't want Home Depot, even though we don't. We do want housing. We need to keep saying we do want housing, we do want housing. There's no other acceptable primary use for the site, because I think that sets up the wrong conversation. If we just beat back Home Depot, which I think we will, then you're just back to square one. We need to set up the conversation with everyone involved to get housing there. That's number one. Number two, I think that they were having a little fun with you, Stu, when they said they were neutral, because if they've got a ground lease, that means they control the site. That means an application doesn't go into the city without their permission. So
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They're
That's
not
what I
neutral.
thought.
They're not
Yeah,
neutral.
They were
They're-
being duplicitous.
Yeah, they're being duplicitous. They're having a little fun with you. And then that leads to my third point, which is, I don't know that there's any head fake, but I think the most likely head fake, and frankly, it's sort of a good one if it's happening, is TRC trying to prove to the owner that every time they try to do something that's not housing, it's not going to work. And therefore, eventually the owner is going to have to see, to see reality. I think that might be the head fake. And I highly doubt if we could ever get TRC to admit that to us, but I would love to try to convince them to take us into their confidence that that is indeed what they're doing.
Yeah. That has struck me as being certainly one possibility is it's TRC pushing this out there to show the owner, say, see, that doesn't go anywhere.
Yep.
You should get that
Right,
out of your
but
head.
try not to burn bridges with us by telling us, oh, we don't have anything to do, we don't support it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that just means that they think we're dumb and we should make sure they are disabused of that notion.
Well, I think we
Right.
basically ignore their assertions that, well, we have nothing to do with this. But Ellie, I believe you're the last person we haven't heard from yet.
Hey there, apologies for being late. What you guys just said resonates with me. I do also think we should be explicit about wanting housing. And I also think I just having dealt with folks on this end, on the other end of this a fair amount, I think it would be good to, I don't know, call them a little bit on what we do think, if we think it might be a head fake. I think half of you guys are former land use attorneys. Like, I think there's a lot of firepower in the arsenal here that maybe could be shown a little bit. All in good ways.
Okay,
I think that's well said.
I think that's everyone. Have I missed anybody? Okay, I wanted to just throw in a couple of my thoughts. One of the things that I found interesting was I went and looked up the zoning, which is CC2. And interestingly, one of the prohibited uses in the CC2 district is building material sales, which is what Home Depot is all about. So to me, what that says is if they're wanting to do a Home Depot here, they aren't just going to need a use permit, they're going to need a rezoning, which puts it in an entirely different ballpark.
Stu, I just want to clarify because I don't know Oakland stuff as well.
Yeah.
You can't do a variance or a conditional use. You actually need, a majority vote on the city council to change the zoning.
You need has to have hearings before the planning commission, and it has to have a vote of the city council, majority vote of the city council, and it can be referended.
That's why I think it's a head fake, because that's a very high bar.
It is. It is.
Okay.
And of course, it's clearly going to need a new EIR. I've got a couple of emails asking about, is this going to need an EIR? And to my mind, the answer is absolutely yes. This is not at all similar to the prior Shops at the Ridge Phase 2. It's entirely different use. There is no way almost anything from that old EIR would be useful here. Plus, it's what, almost 10 years old. It is 10 years old.
Right.
And enough has changed. Even just the fact that the CCA project is being proposed right next door, and there are 2 new projects across the street, all says, no, that old EIR is dead. So I think this would require a subsequent EIR, which is essentially starting from scratch again.
Stu, would we want to recommend to the board that they send a letter to everybody, different people saying that they would need a full new EIR from our reading of this?
I think there are a couple of things, and we should talk about where do we go, what do we do now. But I think that's certainly one of them, is a letter from RCPC saying this doesn't fit and it needs a rezoning, it needs an EIR. You shouldn't even be thinking about this. And as Ken had said earlier, and to continue to say, it needs to be available for housing. And the other thing that we have, again, because I think someone mentioned it, because the city is now working on a housing element, we probably, the board should submit a letter to the city in terms of that housing element, saying this site ought to be on the priority site in the housing element for adding housing, and particularly adding some affordable housing.
And so a little bit on that point real quick, the rules around the housing elements are stricter, so that this time around, when you say that something is available for housing in your housing element, you have to be able to have the state look at it with a straight face and say that housing might really happen there. And exactly how the state would interpret that, I don't know, but that's a great route, because if the city puts it in there as a place they say they're going to build housing, they have to put regulatory money behind that. And they have to actually make that available for housing in some form.
And frankly, I think that one of the things could go along with that would be a rezoning to a mixed-use site, maybe for that matter, perhaps a specific plan or a plan unit
Yeah.
development that would focus on housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Does
think,
CC,
let me add,
does
okay.
CC, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Tom.
I think maybe we're placing the emphasis on the wrong parties. I think we forget about the property owner, forget about the developer, and just put the pressure on the city council to begin to do some reasonable land use planning for the site.
Tom, I think it's all of the above. Absolutely. I think we
Well,
need-
it's not necessary, but I think
yeah.
we can probably accomplish more by putting the pressure at the city level
Yeah.
rather than as a community organization trying to deal with a developer and a property owner. So our leverage is probably greater with the city council.
Yeah.
Again, particularly if we can pull together a coalition of community groups, at least all of North Oakland, but maybe even beyond North Oakland. I think someone mentioned East Bay for Everyone, and certainly they have I don't know exactly how many members they have, but they certainly have a fair amount of political leverage. And everyone I've talked to in any of the North Oakland neighborhood groups is been in the same feeling, the same as it sounds like everyone here is. This site ought to be housing, or at least primarily housing. I don't know. Do we want to make a formal recommendation to the board from the land use committee?
Could I just, before we get to that, could
Sure.
I just raise a couple of points? One is housing allowable use in a CC2 zone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a limit on it?
Let me think. I don't think there
Can it
is.
be
I'd have to
80%
look
housing
again.
or?
There is some, I think I recall seeing there were some minor limitations where you might need a use permit for some types of housing, but in general, it's a use that you can get as of right.
My guess though is that the kind of residential project that would pencil out there probably needs some changes to the zoning. They probably need more density and more height than the zoning currently allows. And so that's part of the process.
Yeah, although the CC2 zoning is pretty darn liberal. It gets, I think it allows you up to 90 feet in height.
Right. I think you're right, Stuart. I know it was like at least 7 or 8 stories.
Yeah.
You also have to look at the density.
Yeah, but the density, there's not much limitation on the density either. I think the only limitation would be what you could show in terms of handling traffic. And of course, one of the things about this site is it ought to have a significant transit orientation to it.
So I'm kind of new to the party, but I'm just going to suggest something. I think that there could be one letter that goes to the city from the board. If you want to get other, other area, neighborhood associations or advocates or whatever to sort of weigh in to make it a collective letter, I think would make it stronger, although it might take more time, and it seems like we might have that time. But the other thing, I would go back to the development, the TRC, and say, okay, you guys, this looks like a bullshit basically, right? But why don't you make a proposal to the landowner and to us that says, how much housing would you need to make their land rent request pencil? Because they said they've asked for money that, just won't pencil, right? But they haven't shown us what it would look like to meet their land rent. And, and then it might be, I mean, the way I've done this when I used to work for developers before I worked for public sector, it was, you'd put the outside game in and then you put what you think is a reasonable proposal in, but, make them go to work. Presumably they're breaking even with the land rent that they've got now because they don't seem in a big hurry to sort of push something forward, which makes me, like they probably don't have to pay the higher land rent that they negotiated until they actually develop something. But it seems to me there's too many people playing too many games in different directions, and we just call them all out.
Yeah. The other thing that actually you brought this up, and I think it's worth maybe in terms of our letter to the city also including this, is one of the things Oakland just initiated a couple of years ago is a vacant parcel tax. But the thing about Oakland's vacant parcel tax is it's pretty small, and it just static, and so it's like maybe $2,000 or $3,000 per parcel per year, and this whole parcel is I think there's maybe 3 parcels in this at most. I think the bank had a separate parcel, and I think possibly the Boston Market had a separate parcel, but most of it was one single parcel. So, but what San Francisco has just done, or I think maybe they're just put on the ballot, is a parcel tax that would escalate. That is to say, the longer the parcel was vacant, the higher the tax would get. And that might start getting their attention.
Or also a higher parcel tax for a larger site.
Yeah, I think you might have to be a little careful about that. There are limitations in terms of constitutional equal protection type of things. That parcel taxes generally you have to have an engineer's report if you're going to do a parcel tax, and you're going to have different parcels have different payments.
Yeah, but it's not by parcel, isn't it? By square foot or something?
No.
Mm-mm.
Like
No.
no.
No, the only thing that's by square footage is real estate tax, and of course Prop 13 puts strict limitations on that.
Well, in San Francisco, I haven't followed the most recent thing, but there's a vacancy tax on commercial parcels that I think are by linear frontage. So they figured out how to do that.
That might be might get you a little bit better, but it's
I
still.
also wanted to say that I support Tom Lolini's direction. You know, I think whether that's the exact thing we say to TRC or not, I don't know, but we have to get TRC really working with us, and they're going to be reluctant. I mean, those of us who've met with them before, they're not inclined to do that, and I think we have to convince them that they really it's in their interest to start working with us, and that's going to take a little bit of doing.
Yeah, I think
one of the things about a parcel tax is that this particular the tax on this parcel is paid by the developer, not the owner, who is the problem.
Probably, yeah.
What I heard was that, their agreement was triple net. So, so the parcel tax isn't going to affect the conversation about housing or anything like that.
Ultimately, what's going to do it is that the owner is eventually going to figure out that they have no other choice. And we have to be patient because it's not going to be a quick process.
Yeah. Ronnie?
Yeah. I think we need to make a statement about, we need to state what we want, what we want housing. We want to, if it's commercial, what kind of commercial, what kind of zoning does it fit in? We have a survey from RCPC. We can include that as to what kind of commercial people are, what we should go out proactively and say, these are the things that this community can support. And they, and it relates to the community, and that we, honestly, I honestly don't understand why Home Depot would think that this is a good site, other than it doesn't have homeless. Or not yet.
Yeah. Getting back briefly.
We got a couple of people that have got their hands up. I'd like to get the hands dealt with first. So Ronnie?
So having lived through far too many City of Oakland sites, they have an unfortunate tendency to let things go and have us have to appeal to, from the Planning Commission to the City Council. So I think we want to try and avoid it there. I think we need to go to the city and as soon as possible, let them, the planning director, go to Gilchrist, go to whoever we have to get this, let them know that all the community groups are together and we oppose it. Because they've done also, we don't want to, it'll lessen the time, perhaps maybe by 5 minutes or a month, but at least let's try.
Okay, Jason.
Yeah, I was just going to note as in terms of what we say to the city or what we ask for or demand from the city or urge this is not, as I understand it, this is not really an application yet. It's a pre-application
That's right.
meeting. And I read the little attached document that describes that, and it says basically the applicant can meet with a zoning person and a planner and get advice on what would be necessary in terms of rezoning or other problems with the site. So I'm not quite sure. It's like we can't really say to the city, deny this application, because it really is not an application.
Right. But I think what I hear people saying is we want to get out in front of this.
Yeah.
And maybe prevent it from ever getting to being a full application.
And so what would the city do to implement that? I mean, they just discourage, I mean, I'm not sure whether they're really in the business of discouraging applicants in that way.
Well, they could look at, for example, again, in terms of the housing element, they put this in as a priority site for housing. That already in itself is somewhat of a discouragement to do something else other than housing. Yeah. And they could talk about doing a rezoning that would make housing a necessary element.
I mean, in San Francisco, when you do that with the city, and it's something the city, the planning department will often say, look, we can't tell you not to go forward, but we can advise you informally that you have little chance of success. Mm-hmm. And so whether the Oakland Planning Department does that or not, I don't know.
Yeah. One of the problems with the Oakland Planning Department right now, and it's been a somewhat longstanding problem, is they're way understaffed and they have a lot of turnover.
Right.
So
and they're chasing a lot of things. Yeah.
They are. And I mean, the ballpark being the big one, the shiny object.
So that in and of itself, it tells me, from my conversations with people on the commission, is that the neighborhoods have way more power than they may imagine that they have. And I think the idea to step out in front of this and be more assertive about what our expectations are, I think would be a good thing. And to the extent that it's more than just RCPC, I think would make it stronger. I don't know where does Temescal have a neighborhood association that's active?
Yep. Not very, but there are a couple.
Yeah. I'm not new to the neighborhood, but I'm new to all this, right? I mean, I'm not new to the topic, but I'm new to the neighborhood. And
actually, in fact, we may even be able to get some people interested. I've gotten a couple of emails from folks in Piedmont saying they were interested in opposing this.
Yeah. Well, there are also a number of housing advocate groups, both citywide and metropolitan. Basically, I think they would be willing to, back us up on that.
They're already tracking this, and they'd be great partners. Yeah.
So it sounds like what we're talking about is recommending to the board that we do a couple of things. One is to start pulling together a broad coalition of different groups, neighborhood groups, interest groups, housing advocates, etc., that would be united both in opposing this project and pushing to see this site designated as a priority site for housing. And then maybe looking more specifically at letters both to the planning department, planning director, and in terms of the general plan process, in terms of the housing element, recommending that this ought to be a priority site for housing. Do those sound like things we want to try and recommend to the board? Are there people have any other ideas or comments on this?
I wanted to just one last comment on this, which is, I think we should be careful to avoid we should be very general. We want housing. Home Depot is not housing. Home Depot doesn't coexist with housing. If we start to get specific about what kind of housing or what kind of commercial, the problem is that real estate is very difficult financially right now to develop. It doesn't really pencil. And as soon as you say, I want this and I want that, the owner and TRC can say, that's not possible. You can't, and then we lose credibility. We should just say housing, because let them figure out and come back to us with what that would look like. But if we try to dictate what it looks like, it gives them more ammunition to say, well, you can't do that.
Yeah, well, we can say some general things. We can say we'd like to see this, whatever goes in here, to be connected to the surrounding community.
Oh yeah, physically, I think that's fine. I think we shouldn't dictate uses, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, by uses, you mean not specific commercial uses, but housing, not the
Well,
type of housing, but just housing in general, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And,
But
and
I think we want to say high density housing. We don't.
Yeah,
want-
that's fine. That's going to be what works
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But what about the third thing, which is to communicate to TRC, whether we copy their landowner or not, right? That, you know, this doesn't play, and this is what we think you should be doing. You make the claim that you can't pencil the housing based on the value that the owner is asking of you, but why don't you show us what it looks like to meet
Yep.
their, show us and show them and show the city what their land rent demand would require in terms of housing.
And you know what, Tom? The CCA project next door showed everybody their entire pro forma.
Yeah, but that's an exception.
No, believe me, I know that, but
Almost
there's a
never
precedent
see
there.
that.
There's a precedent
but
there.
I-
That's all I'm
Okay.
saying.
Yeah.
And I
We
and
can
I
point
would
to
say in the context of all this, I think we should not connect what's happening at the Ridge site to the CCA site. I think
should or we
we
shouldn't?
should force them into some kind of, even the city, into some kind of specific plan that addresses both sites. They're both very large sites in the middle of a very, you
Yeah.
know, sort of sensitive neighborhood.
Yep.
And then there's a whole lot of susceptible other sites along the Broadway corridor heading south, right? Or heading, sorry, is that
Yes,
west?
south.
Yeah, west,
Down
right?
towards downtown, you mean?
Toward downtown, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
that's south.
Uh,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of susceptible sites down there. So they did a specific plan down around 27th Street, right? Why don't they do a specific plan around here? And that's where the city could force them both. Force maybe is too strong a word. They could force them both into a specific
Encourage
plan.
them.
I think that's really
Encourage, yes,
smart.
yes,
So,
suggest.
Tom, you know, Uba has met with Dan Cal before and people on the planning commission for exactly that purpose. What an opportunity with these two sites together, what could be achieved for the city. I mean, you would think somebody would want to create a legacy project here.
Yeah.
The other question though that I have, Stu, I don't know if you know this or somebody, what's the penalty if Oakland does not hit its housing goals? I mean, we should be throwing that out there too. Like, here's a nice piece of property. Everybody wants housing on it, and it's going to cost the city, you know, X or whatever if we don't put housing.
One of the threats, if we don't meet the RENA goals, is someone can come in with an SB 35 project, and then the city has no choice at all.
Which is
an SB 35 is a large, usually primarily housing and with a priority on whatever goals the RENA goals were not being met.
Well, just to explain it really briefly, if you qualify for SB 35, the city has no choice but to approve the project. There's no process, no planning commission, no EIR. And right now, I think you probably have to have a 50% affordable project, 50, to qualify, which is not really ever, it's very difficult for that to happen. But if the city misses its goals too much, that goes down to, I think, 15%, where you could see a developer.
I think it depends on how badly you miss and which.
That's correct. That's
So
correct. But
it's
you could see a developer
but
actually.
the point is, the main
invoke
thing
it.
that happens, the big threat, the sword hanging over the city, is that you don't get any choice, and you don't get to negotiate anything. That the developer plunks it down and says, "We're building this."
It's
Even
very
if the
powerful.
design review doesn't
That's in
count,
the
right?
courts.
There's no design review?
You can do objective design review, but only objective.
You can only hold it to objective standards that were in the code before the application.
Right. So
And
it's tough.
what does RENA stand for? What's the acronym?
Regional Housing Needs Allocation.
Yeah.
And they just came out with new ones.
Yeah. There's the next cycle is just starting.
Yeah, I'd like to
Your cycles.
just push us even to go further with respect to the city and the housing element, and in developing any kind of approach to either the city, a city council person, or the planning commissioner, that we get up front in terms of either a specific area plan, as people have been talking about, that would be heavily emphasizing housing, or a rezoning that would even make it more difficult not to have housing on the site
Yeah.
than the current zoning. And I think we have to start pushing now in terms of doing that, because it's all such a long process. And at the same time, of course, we can get more aggressive with the particular developer. But I think the city approach should be a very comprehensive one. And as we've talked about, should include as many neighborhood groups that would be involved, or citywide groups, or housing advocacy groups as we can find.
Yeah. Okay, so does this all make sense to people? I think we can say that this would be a recommendation from the committee to the board to these various directions to push forward on several different fronts. So let's move on. The second item on the agenda is the neighboring property, CCA. And a couple of things that are going on with this, and this is the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight, is CCA has approached RCPC about having a meeting, and they have proposed a next, hold on, let me get my calendar here. Yeah, next Wednesday, the 4th, in the evening, to meet with people, with the board and the land use committee. And I know we have a number of people who are on the land use committee, some other people who are not on the land use committee. I think we can probably make this meeting as broad as we can, as we want to. So I guess what I would like for people who are interested in coming to that meeting and can make it, to send me an email and let me know. And the email you should use is landuse@rockridge.org. And if you can send an email to that email address and let me know that you're interested in attending, we'll try and, because it looks like pretty much all of the board, I think we have one member of the board that can't make it, but everybody else looks like they can make it for next Wednesday. And I think we can, if we have people from the land use committee as well, that will give it perhaps a bit more specificity in terms of people, because we have a lot of people on this committee that have good special knowledge that would be helpful in terms of discussing. This is one of the things they apparently have been doing, is they've come up with design guidelines, and they want to explain to us what these design guidelines are going to be. So particularly those of you who are architects or have architectural background, that would be your help would be invaluable in terms of your input at that meeting. So that's going to be next Wednesday. The other thing, I did go and look, and the city has put up a bunch of the materials for the EIR and for the whole planning process on their website. They have it's a special site, and I don't remember the exact name. Maybe I'll see if I can send it around. When I think I got an email from the planner who's handling the project, giving me a link to where you can find all the documents. So what I'll do is I'll send that link around to everyone, and you can look at all of the documents. There's not a lot there in terms of the EIR yet. There's all the scoping comments that were submitted. There are all of the plans that were submitted as part of the project application, but I think most of you probably already seen those. I don't think, as I recall, they didn't have anything yet from the design review that I saw. It was up. Maybe I missed it, but they apparently are going to be talking about this at this coming session this next Wednesday. So that's the other thing that we should be aware of. I don't know where that process is. The planner, I talked to the planner, and the planner wouldn't give me any hint about how far along they've gotten and when we should. I think the only thing she said was that we might expect the draft EIR to come out, quote, sometime this spring. Well, it's already sometime this spring, and this was a month ago when she said that.
Well, it's not the end of spring until June 20th or something, right?
That's true. But this has been going on for a long time. They put out the notice of preparation. It must be a year and a half ago. So it's been dragging, and I don't know. One of the things that the developers have said to us several times, and we'll see what they say next week, but they've said that at the moment, given the pricing on labor and materials, this project simply doesn't pencil out. And I don't know if that's still the case or not, but last time we met with them, they said, well, here's what we would like to do, but we don't know if we can.
It doesn't pencil out now. No project like that pencils out right at this moment.
Yeah. So
Well, it would make a good community park, you know, CCA could get a tax write-off.
I think the part of the problem, frankly, is that CCA is using basically they've made a deal with the developers, and CCA gets a big chunk out of what the developers get, and they're using that to build to enlarge their San Francisco campus. But I don't know. I haven't been over there lately. Has any of you been over to CCA lately? I had heard last fall that they were back at having students there.
Yes,
that the campus had.
they are.
Is that true?
Yeah.
And
It's hard to tell their students from the high school students that wander back and forth up the street, but yeah.
So I don't know whether that means that CCA has pulled back from their idea of moving everything over to San Francisco, or whether this is a temporary thing. We don't know. And we maybe can find some about that as well next week. I don't know if there'll be people from CCA as well as from the developers. It would be nice if there were. But that's as much as we know on that side, unless anybody else has something they can add. But as I say, I think next week's meeting might be quite informative. And the last thing I hit on the agenda was an update on the housing study, and that hasn't really gone anywhere, and I'm just not sure whether it's going to. One of the things, again, as you know, we've got a new board, and we have a new chair, and I don't know if I'm going to get reappointed as chair of the land use committee. And if I don't get reappointed, then I think probably the housing study will probably disappear with me, which I feel would be sad, but I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens. But that's going to be the decision on who is chairing the various committees will be made at the board meeting next Thursday. So we'll see what happens. But I don't know if does anyone else have anything to add? Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and appreciate your attention.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
Thomas.
Thank you.